as we commit to give for the things that God has laid before us. I can't always tell you. I don't know what the stories are going to look like. I don't know who they are.
Some Sundays, and I'm not exaggerating when I say this, some Sundays we have more children in children's church than we used to have in the entire congregation.
We all, I think, look forward to that day and that time when we have a place, one that we can, quote, call our own, as it were. We don't have to set up, don't have to take down, don't have to move stuff in and out, don't have to worry about things, disappearing, walking away, or being damaged, that sort of thing.
Let's look at the footprint, auditorium, and you asked specifically about classrooms. As you can see, we have all these classrooms.
But it's one of those things about God's timing. God's timing was just right. And could we buy it, but a check could be written for it, and it was paid in full. And so now they have 15 acres that they will be able to grow on, not just build a building and move to a permanent facility, but they can grow multiple times larger than what they are right now and minister to a greater, broader audience because of your faithfulness. Today, we are going to be in the book of Nehemiah, and Nehemiah is a book of construction, reconstruction, rebuilding, I think is actually the theme of the book of Nehemiah. And you can hear behind us
there's some building going on.
Yeah, some work happening. We're standing in their new sanctuary, which by the time you see this video will even look different than what it does right now. I mean, we're a couple of weeks away when we're recording this. Nehemiah, it begins by describing a burden that Nehemiah has for up his home, where he's from. As a church, we had a burden to come to Bertie County and build that, to minister to the people over here. And you weren't the first campus pastor, so you didn't start over here, but you were still a part of that process because you were an elder at the time.
Right.
From your perspective, what were some of the conversations we had about our burden for Bertie?
We just felt like it was one of the places that the Lord was speaking to us about, maybe was underserved for various reasons. And the best way for us, we felt like, from a leadership perspective, was to have a physical location over here where we could be a life-giving church and reach out and minister practical needs to people. And it kind of took off from there.
Originally, we met at the Wrangler building, and they were still meeting there, if I recall, when you became the campus pastor.
That's correct.
And then moved to where you would be worshiping today, or that campus is worshiping today, at the old Bertie High School.
That's correct.
And in just a few weeks, we'll be in this building. In Nehemiah's case, the king asked him, what can he do? He said, I want to go back. And he said, well, what can I do? He said, write letters for me. For us to be where we're at required the favor of some other people.
I mean, there's a lot of people. I mean, it goes all the way back to you, the church leadership, elders, that had the vision and shared the burden, to make things better and to have a presence, full-time presence over here. But then even to the point where one of our biggest challenges was a land search. And eventually there had to be somebody who understood at least enough of our dream and burden to say, you know what, I'm willing to make this available so that there can be a church placed here. And so, it looks different for different perspectives, but there's been a lot of people involved in that either shared the burden and the vision with you or were able to get on board with it.
Even
the process.
to the school system has been very
kind
to us
gracious,
with the building and the cost of the building and we want you to be here.
Which was a huge favor to us, to be able to have a more established presence. The school system, as you referred to, just literally welcomed us with open arms and said, here it is, do what you need and want to with this building. And we've had a great working relationship with them all these years and continue to do so, and we look for ways to serve them in practical ways, and in turn that service and kindness that the church has shown through the years has been given back to us many times.
Right. And in the book of Nehemiah, we find other people giving resources, and there have been people both inside the church and outside the church who have given resources to be able to make this construction a reality.
Yeah, and the thing that you discover in any project this size, it takes a lot of people being involved. You know, it's not just one or two people giving significant amounts. It's a lot of people doing what they can.
Right. But in the book of Nehemiah, they run into some obstacles. So today we're going to talk about actual warfare that takes place, you know. But before that, there's just a lot of discouragement. There are people demeaning him for what they're trying to do. They call him stupid, you know, essentially, you know, you're unqualified to be able to do those things. And you mentioned finding somebody to see the vision for us to be able to buy the land.
Yes.
That through this process was the number one obstacle.
Absolutely, hands down.
We were told, or you particularly, you mostly, were told no so many times, or given astronomical prices for pieces of land. And you know, we're in one of the poorest counties. You would think in a poor county that land would be freely available, and if somebody wanted to build something, it would be easy, but that wasn't the case.
Not at all. I stopped counting somewhere in the 30s, the numbers of contacts I made, either on phones, personally, letters that I wrote to people, that either they just could not see the vision, didn't have a burden for it, didn't understand the necessity of it, or as you said, there were a few instances where people said, yeah, we're willing to help. In fact, I recall one instance where the conversation with something like, yeah, we understand, we want to bless the church, we want to help you. And the number they gave us on just a few acres of land was about half the entire cost of this
piece,
of this project.
Right, the entire project.
Yeah, the entire project. And I was like, I'm glad you want to bless us.
Yeah.
So,
right.
But
you were glad they didn't want to curse you, is what you're glad.
Yeah. So, but that was the number one hurdle we've had to face.
One of the things that I think is important for people to know, in your own personal life, in your organization, your family, your church, everything is not always a smooth ride. It's often a grind, you know, that you just got to keep pushing through. And if you believe God has called you to do it, you got to be faithful to do it.
Thing that I remind people, they look at the project where it is now, and they're like, oh, that's amazing, and it started just a little while ago, and you're here. And I say, but the part you're missing is the 18 months or so prior to the preparation and the work, the planning and stuff that goes on, and anything significant that we accomplish in our life, just like Nehemiah did, or this project, there's a lot of work, prayer, sweat goes into it, oftentimes before you start to see the results, but you got to be committed and just stick with it.
Ezra and Nehemiah kind of go together. They tell a similar story. So Ezra talks about the rebuilding of the temple. Nehemiah talks about the rebuilding of the wall or the city. So they're kind of joined together that way. As a matter of fact, in Jewish history, they would have been considered one book until the last few hundred years. It was just one single book, and it was separated into Ezra and Nehemiah. It's very probable that Ezra wrote both Ezra and Nehemiah. We see Nehemiah from Nehemiah's point of view, but he probably was not the one that wrote it. And both of them are about building or rebuilding, construction or reconstruction. And we kind of set up some of that. And so as you get to the end of the book of Nehemiah, one of the things I like about it is this return to the Word of God and what it has to say. And I say this frequently. I am thankful for the last year and a half or so that we have been reading through the Bible together, and we've put podcasts and journals and reading plans out for you because I think that it is making a significant difference in biblical literacy. I have a friend, and he oversimplifies it, and often statements are oversimplified, but he says you can't be any more spiritual than you are scriptural. And let me clarify that, okay, what I believe about it. One, when you first come to Christ, you're way more spiritual than you are biblical, okay, or scriptural. That's the truth. But you can't stay that way. That's the thing. If you're going to continue to grow in Christ, you're going to have a much stronger biblical foundation if you want to remain a spiritual person. And so I like that part about it. But we're going to focus today specifically on how building
brings opposition. I laughed in that every time I think about it. So there was, Berkeley County is an unusual place in that it's very poor, but it has limited landowners. And when Jay said he searched everywhere for land, he did. And there was this one guy who said, he went away and came back and said, we want to bless the church. There was a piece of land we wanted to buy. And he said, we're going to give you a deal. And he said, we'll sell it to you for $44,000 an acre. Now, I don't know if y'all know much about Bertie County, but I'm pretty sure there ain't a single piece of land in Bertie County worth $44,000 an acre. And we just laughed like, gosh, I'm glad he didn't want to take advantage of us because we'd have been in a mess. But you run into some challenges in that when you're trying to make progress. And so when I was young, I was naive. How many of you were naive when you were young? All right, yeah. And if you didn't raise your hand, you're still naive. I was naive when I was young, and I believed that everybody wanted progress and growth, whether it was in their personal life, their spiritual life, their church, their community, their region, their business. I thought everybody wants progress and growth. As I got older, what I found out was most everybody does not. As a matter of fact, what I found is most people would rather be comfortable than challenged. And all growth challenges people. It doesn't matter. Like when you first got married, it was just the two of you and you had a baby, you just grew by one. But it did what? It challenged you. Guaranteed it challenged you. It changed your life, turned it all completely upside down. And it doesn't matter what it is, if you're moving forward in your personal growth, you might be wanting to lose weight, or you might be wanting to get a college degree, or you might be wanting to better yourself for a career. Whenever you're growing, you're going to have challenges that come against you. And they're going to be discouraging at times. They're going to be disheartening. It's going to be frustrating. And it doesn't matter what the area is. The vast majority of people prefer the status quo. The overwhelming majority of people would rather have things as they are than to do something new, right? Like if it changes in the slightest degree, it throws us off to where we can't function. And when you grow and change, there are things that happen, in your life. And what you will find is there will be people who are your friends or your coworkers or their cohorts or whatever. The minute that you start growing, they turn in opposition against you. Right? Like they're no longer your friend. Something happens. Like they start to oppose what it is that you're doing. And I see this in a lot of places. It happens, in your workplace, when you say, I want to be a better worker. I want to refine my skills. I want to move up in the company. There are people, as long as you're not making them uncomfortable and doing the same thing they're doing, they don't say anything. But the minute that you say, I want to do better, it becomes a problem. I see it happen in friends. If you have a friend group and you say, you go do a particular thing that's probably not healthy for you or your marriage or whatever. It could be a myriad of things. It's not just a singular thing. It could be a myriad of things. And you say, I don't think that's best for me to do anymore. And you stop doing it. As long as you were going with them, they're fine. As long as you were hanging out with them, you were fine. But the minute you say, no, I'm not doing that anymore, they don't like it. And part of the reason is when somebody grows, it causes us to examine our own life and say, what about me needs to change? Should I be going to this place? Should I be doing this thing? Should I be making progress, in particular areas? It happens in business. Like people, we'll talk about this a little bit. I'm always amazed. Like, as long as you're broke, people don't care and don't say anything. Right? They got nothing to say. But the minute that you have any success whatsoever, then they've got something to say. And it's this amazing thing. And church may be the worst place. right? I mean, churches in general, not just this church, and I want to say something about that in just a minute. Churches in general prefer the status quo. Like they don't want to change, they don't want to do something new, and it can show up in a lot of ways in music and dress and programming, you know. And the funny thing is, nobody can be coming to something. Nobody may be participating in something, but the minute you stop it, like you would have thought you had killed the president, right? It's just one of those things that we just don't like. And when we start to grow and change, you know, change is a curse word in church, right? Some of you are at this church because you were at another church and tried to change and got cursed at. Right? Some of you are scared to laugh because you don't know what's coming next. But that's just a fact of it. I mean, it becomes, we make people uncomfortable. And when, you know, I'm a student of churches, so I always want to see what are churches doing that are growing, because I want to be challenged to do things differently and better. But what happens is when we see somebody else doing things differently and better, then or making changes in their life, we're like, well, am I supposed to make that change? I don't want to make that change. I really like what I'm doing. I really like where I'm at. I don't want to do something different. And one church growing causes other churches to examine what they're doing and how they're doing it. And if you want to become a target, it don't matter what it is. If you want to become a target, your personal life, your business, your spiritual life, your family, your church, your organization, if you want to become a target, start growing. It doesn't matter. Just start growing. And it's not always numerically. Sometimes there's a myriad of ways that you can grow intellectually. You want to be a target, you just start growing. Now, I want to say I'm thankful. One, I'm thankful for the blessings that we have experienced here. I think we have some challenges ahead of us that we've got to sort through, that when you get to a certain point, you know, let me say it like this. We shoehorned 921 people in here last week, okay? We can't do that every week. How many of you want to do that every week? How many of you would like to have 921 people? The rest of you need to get on the boat, okay? I'm just telling you, all right? But you know what that means? If we can't do it in 2 services, what does it mean? You got to figure a different plan out. You got to build a building. You got to have a 3rd service. You got to do something. You got to come up with a plan. And either one of them are uncomfortable. Either one of them, you know, because y'all are sitting here thinking, he's going to ask us, will we go to a 3rd service? You know, will we agree to come at 6 o'clock in the morning to church or something? No, that's not the next question. But either it requires us to adjust our schedules, or it requires us to adjust our giving so we can make certain things happen. That's just the nature of it. And I'm thankful for those problems. And I want to say, I said this in the first service, I want to say, like, this church does phenomenally well at change. Like, the complaining and griping of you can get whiplash around here. We'll change it in a hurry. And ain't scared to do it. Like, if it ain't working, kill it. That's my philosophy. And so, like, you know, you do tremendously well. And I'm thankful for that. I'm glad that it's just not a lot of bickering and fighting. I mean, it's just a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful place to be able to serve and work with people, because I know pastors are pulling their hair out to make one little change. You know, because the church is revolting against them. And I'm just thankful for your willingness to help us to continue to grow. But the thing is, when we grow, whether it's spiritually or numerically or financially or whatever that may look like as a church or as an individual, there are some things that you need to be prepared for that are coming your way, okay? So if your business does better, there are some things you need to be prepared for that are coming your way. If your family begins to get stronger and move forward and become a more cohesive unit, there are some things you need to be prepared for that are coming your way. If you are growing spiritually and God is working in your life and you feel like you're drawing closer to him, there are some things you need to be prepared for that are coming your way. As a church, like the fact that you come to church here, if we continue to grow, there are some things that you have to be prepared for that are coming your way. And so I want to talk to you about 3 things this morning. Here's the first one. Some people will mock and ridicule you. I don't know if you've ever been called names, but I was very redheaded growing up. Some of y'all think I'm a blonde. I don't even know how that happened, but the snow's getting deeper. That's a fact. But last Sunday, as I was traveling, I was looking for something, and I ended up in a folder on my Google Drive that has old photos of the church. There was a picture of me and Jay. So it had to have been 10 or 12 years ago. It was in that ballpark. I'm not exactly sure when. So I've been here at Open Door attending for 18 years. I've been on staff for 15 years and pastor for almost 13 years now. And so it was 10 or 12 years ago. And I looked at it and I was like, holy cow, my hair was really, really red when I was in my 40s. I didn't recognize it. And here's the thing, like red hair is not a big deal now. But in the late 60s, early 70s, and early 80s, when I was growing up, it wasn't a thing. All right, you were different, okay? You were weird. And I am extremely different because I have the rarest combination. The rarest combination hair and eye color is red hair, blue eyes. So you can look that up if you want to. It's the rarest combination in the world. I have the rarest combination. I have red hair and blue eyes. Now it's gray hair and gray eyes. They're just gray. They're both gray. Anyway, but when I was younger, like it wasn't cool. It became cool when I became an adult, and women everywhere started trying to dye their hair red. And it would come out burgundy, auburn, just some strange color. They could never quite get it, that fire engine red. But when I was growing up, I got called a lot of names. The basic one was red on the head, mater head, eraser head, carrot top, Opie. And I had to wait until they got color Andy Griffith before I realized why they were calling me Opie. Right? Black and white, it ain't even a joke, right? Black and white Andy Griffith ain't even a joke. Like, what are they talking about? I don't look like Opie, Anyway, I had people call me Pumpkinhead, and then as I got older, I thought, were they calling me that for the color of my hair or the size of my head? Probably both. Fire engine. Like I got called all kinds of names, and it hurt my feelings because words hurt, right? Ever who said sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me for the very first time was somebody who had been hurt by words and was trying to cover it up. That's who it was. Because words hurt. And sometimes when we're moving in a direction, people will aim words at us. Some of them may be true. Some of them may not be true, but they still hurt. It says this. It says, Sanballat was very angry when he learned that we were rebuilding the wall. He flew into a rage and mocked the Jews. Now, let me just stop right here and say, when people are mocking you, usually there is some kind of underlying insecurity and anger problem. It says here, he got mad, and the way he handled his anger was he made fun of or he mocked them. And he says, saying in front of his friends and the Samaritan army officers, what does this bunch of poor, feeble Jews think they're doing? Do they think they can build a wall in a single day by just offering a few sacrifices? Do they actually think they can make something of stones from a rubbish heap and charred ones at that? Tobiah the Ammonite, who was standing beside him, remarked, that stone wall would collapse if even a fox walked along the top of it. Notice some of the things that they say about him. They begin mocking them, saying they're poor, they're feeble, they're incapable. They make fun of their sacrifices. They talk about the stones that are there are damaged. They're charred. They never can be used again. Why are they trying to build a wall out of stuff that should be discarded? They said even if they build it, it's unstable, and a fox walking across it would bring it down. And so they're making fun of them, and they're mocking them. And this is kind of the beginning. When you start on a journey of growth in any area of your life, people will begin to hurl insult. Well, who do you think you are? Right? Like that's the most common one. Is who do you think you are? You think you're better than us? You think you're better than me? You think you're better because you won't go do that? You know, and growing up they would call, you know, you think you're a holy roller, you know, you think you're super spiritual. Who do you think you are? Jesus. You know, when you're making spiritual progress, people begin to make fun of you and hurl insults at you, and that's what's happening here. And so any area of your life, you can expect people to begin to mock you and people to begin to make fun of you and ridicule you for what you're doing. They don't know. Listen, he even says they don't even know what they're doing. They're just incompetent people. But I want you to notice the response. It says, then I prayed, this is Nehemiah, then I prayed, hear us, God, for we are being mocked. May their scoffing fall back on their own heads, and may they themselves become captives in a foreign land. Do not ignore their guilt. Do not blot out their sins, for they have provoked you to anger here in front of the builders. At last the wall was completed to half its height around the entire city, for the people had worked with enthusiasm. Now I want you to notice this prayer, because this is important. Sometimes we're scared what we're going to say to God. And my advice would be say whatever you want to say to God. Be scared of what you're going to say to people. Jesus on the cross said, forgive them for they don't know what they're doing. Nehemiah said, God, hold them accountable, punish them, let everything fall on their heads, and may they become captives in another land. Right? And I wanted to point that out for some of you who may have prayed that prayer for some people. Because we think when we go to God, like we just got to be all nice about people and, oh, Lord, bless them and heal them and help them. And I think you should pray those prayers. But sometimes when you go to God, you need to get off of your chest what it is you're feeling. God, kill them. Just take them out today. But listen, and we're going to talk about this in a minute. It's better to say it to God because he's going to do what he wants to anyway, than to say it to people and make a situation go from bad to worse. Answering their mockery and ridicule is probably not going to make it any better. We think that we have to reply to everything somebody else says. No, you don't. As a matter of fact, most of the time, the best thing you can do is just shut up. Don't say a word back. Take it to God. Abraham Lincoln, they had a name for this. It's not registering with me today what it is, but he had this practice that when people would tick him off, he'd write them a letter. He'd say whatever he wanted to say. He'd seal it up, address it, and he'd stick it in a desk drawer. As a matter of fact, when he died, there's this whole collection of letters. Mean, hateful, like, just rah, just I want to kill you kind of letters. But he never sent them. He said what he had to say. He got it off his chest, and it stayed right there. It was done. They never knew how he felt. I'm just telling you, sometimes what you have to do is say, God, I want to deal with this. What I really want to do is kill them. What I really want to do is make them suffer, but I'm leaving this in your hands, and what I would really like you to do. But after I pray about it, I'm done. Now, here's the thing, though. If you do not respond and get caught up in their drama, that's a good word for it. If you think that they're going to go silently away and never appear again, you're mistaken. Typically what happens is they say, we're going to ramp up the attack. And it says this is the second piece, some will get angry and fight against you. I wish mocking is all you will get. But here's what I'm going to tell you. Some people will go out of their way to hurt you. like intentionally try to destroy you. And this is the thing. Ain't nobody said a word, because Jerusalem is inhabited. People are living there. The wall's just torn down. The people are in disarray. It's not a pretty place. Nobody said anything as long as the wall was torn down. Nobody said anything as long as they didn't have anywhere to live. The minute that they started trying to make progress, suddenly they had opposition. And this is the thing I need everybody in the room to understand. It doesn't matter whether you're trying to improve yourself from a spiritual standpoint, a physical standpoint, a mental standpoint, improve your marriage, your home life, your spiritual life, your church, your business. It doesn't matter. As long as you're broke and everything is broken, they're not going to make fun of you. But the minute that you get up and dust yourself off and take one step, you don't have to get all the way there. All you got to do, they hadn't even finished building. I mean, it was going to be spectacular when they finished. They hadn't even finished building. All you got to do is take one step in a direction. And suddenly people come out of the woodwork. And not only will they mock and ridicule you, they will get angry and fight against you, deliberately trying to harm you. It says, but when Sanballat and Tobiah and the Arabs, Ammonites, and Ashdodites, and I always want to say termites here for some reason, heard that the work was going ahead and that the gaps in the wall of Jerusalem were being repaired, they were furious. It says they got mad. It says they all made plans to come and fight against Jerusalem and throw us into confusion. But we prayed to our God and guarded the city day and night to protect ourselves. Then the people of Judah began to complain. The workers are getting tired and there is so much rubble to be moved. We will never be able to build the wall by ourselves. Meanwhile, our enemies were saying, before they know what's happening, we will swoop down on them and kill them and end their work. When their threats and their mockery didn't work, the enemy decided they were going to resort to measures to keep them from completing the work they were called to do. I want you to notice verse 9. It says, but we prayed to our God and guarded the city day and night to protect ourselves. And I'm going to point this out twice before we close. I'm all for prayer, and you should pray first. But you should also prepare. Praying and not standing guard is ignorant. Y'all with me? Let me say that again. Praying and not standing guard is ignorant, careless. It's going to get you in trouble. Saying, I prayed about it. Everything's going to be fine. It might be. I'm not saying God can't, but it says they prayed and they guarded the city. But the problem was they were tired. So now they've got two jobs. They're not just building a wall. They're having to guard and be prepared to fight, keep their eyes open, always be looking over their shoulder while they're building the wall at the same time. It says the workers are getting tired and there's so much rubble to be moved, we will never be able to build the wall by ourselves. I just want to tell you, there are going to be times in progress in your life when you're building something great, when you're doing the work God has called you to do, that you're going to get tired and discouraged and think about doing something else. I read an article in the middle of the night. I didn't sleep good last night. So it was in the middle of the night about this lady who had given up sugars. So it's bread and processed sugars. And anyway, she was saying like she had lost 100 pounds over 12 months, just giving up breads and sugars. That's the only thing in her life she had changed. And after 30 days, she said she went out to eat with some friends, and like she had seen some remarkable changes already in her life, in her physical and mental makeup by being able to do this. But about 30 days in, she went to dinner with some friends, and they brought a bowl of a basket of hot bread to the table. And if you're trying to not eat bread, that's as close to temptation as you can get, right? And when we get to heaven, bread's going to be fine, right? But it causes issues, right now, down here on this earth. And she said she broke down crying. And she said, now I would never go back. She said, but in that moment, she said, I realized I was having to do without this for the rest of my life, and I so desperately wanted it. And she's like, I just wanted to eat a piece of bread right that moment with my friends. You're going to have times when you're trying to do something good where you're going to get discouraged. You're going to be like, man, I would really like to do that. I'm going to make an honest confession. I said this in the first service, and I don't want anybody to take this wrong. I want to tell you that at times what goes through my mind. There are occasions, I would say probably half a dozen times over the 13 years I've been pastor, that in my mind I thought, gosh, it would be nice to pastor 50 people in a little country church and just be me. Right? We have almost as many people on staff here at this church as I had the first Sunday at the church I pastored in the suburbs of Cresswell. And I said that somewhere the other day, and the guy's like, Cresswell's got suburbs? I said, yeah, Cherry. Anyway, like, I would never go back. Like, I don't want to do that. But there are some days, like, I'm so tired, I'm exhausted, like, everything that's going through my mind and what I see that lies ahead and what needs to be done. Gosh, it would just be easier to be me, one staff person, and 50 people. Like, this would be great. The problem with me, though, is if I happened, I wouldn't want to keep 50 people in a little country church. I'd just be like, let's go, let's do something, let's see how many more people we can get. That'd just be my nature. So I know it wouldn't last long. But some days I think that, and I only tell you that to say this. Some of you are going to try to grow in your family. You're going to try to grow your marriage. You're going to try to change your health. You're going to try to change your mindset. You're going to try to grow your business. You're going to try to grow your career. You're going to try to change your lifestyle. You're going to try, maybe the church is going to grow, all of those things. And you think everything's going to be fine. As long as you're growing, everything's going to, you're going to have some days that are going to be exhausting. You're going to be tired. You're just going to have to get up and do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. You're not going to feel like doing what it is that needs to be done, and you're going to be discouraged. He said they have come against them and caused them to be so frustrated. And the one thing I would tell you, the enemy desires to see your demise, and the first step in your demise is your discouragement. Here's the last piece. Work and let God fight. I can't tell you how many times I give this piece of advice to people. I give it a lot in the church. Somebody will say, did you know what so-and-so said? Nope. Sometimes I do. If I do, yeah, I heard. Are you going to say something? Nope. Why? Here's the number one reason. I don't need to lend credibility to their stupidity. And we believe we have to answer everything they say. No. Sometimes the best thing you can do is shut up and work. And let God deal with it. Just put your head down, do the right thing, keep moving forward, and let God handle everything else. Stop trying to put out every fire and defend every attack. Focus on the work God has called you to do. Because if you're busy putting out fires, you'll never be able to do the work. And if you're busy doing the work, you won't have time to put out the fires. Now, I'm not saying there aren't moments where you need to step away and deal with something, but I would say they are so limited. Most of the time, we just need to work and let God fight. It says this says the Jews who lived near the enemy came and told us again and again. So the gossips in the Jewish community that weren't living in Jerusalem, they were living near the enemy. They'd come back. Hey, you know what they said? You know what they said? You know what they said? You know what they're doing? It says they will come from all directions and attack us. It says, so I placed armed guards behind the lowest parts of the wall in the exposed areas. I stationed the people to stand guard by families, armed with swords, spears, and bows. Then as I looked over the situation, I called together the nobles and the rest of the people and said to them, don't be afraid of the enemy. Remember the Lord who is great and glorious, and fight for your brothers, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your homes. When our enemies heard that we knew of their plans and that God had frustrated them, we all returned to our work on the wall. Now, let me just stop right here and point out a couple of things. One, everybody had a job to do, and everybody's job wasn't the same. Some of them were building the wall. Some of them were standing guard. Some of them were where they couldn't see. Others were where they could see. Some were lookouts. Some didn't, it wasn't their responsibility. It says, but from then on, it goes on, it says, but from then on, only half my men worked while the other half stood guards with spears, shields, bows, and coats of mail. The leaders stationed themselves behind the people of Judah who were building the wall. The laborers carried on their work with one hand supporting their load and one hand holding their weapon. They are ready to fight all the time. It's all the builders had a sword belted to their side. The trumpeter stayed with me to sound the alarm. Then I explained to the nobles and officials and all the people, the work is very spread out and we are widely separated from each other along the wall. When you hear the blast of the trumpet, rush to wherever it is sounding, then our God will fight for us. Everybody had a responsibility. If you're going to grow, you've got to understand, like, you can't do everything. You're not smart enough, talented enough, good enough, rich enough to be able to do everything. You've got to have people around you that can do what needs to be done. And there are going to be some people who lay brick while other people guard. And they watch out and they look. There are going to be other people who are bringing the stones. Everybody's got a job. That's the way the church, organization, the family, the business, everything works when we all are doing the job that we are supposed to do. We've been gifted to do so that it comes together. And it says when one was in trouble, they all came. Like that's the picture of a family. That's the picture of a church, right? When somebody's in trouble, the church should rally to that person or to that area. And it says, I also told everyone living outside the walls to stay in Jerusalem. That way they and their servants could help with guard duty at night and at work during the day. During this time, none of us, not I, nor my relatives, nor my servants, nor the guards who were with us, ever took off our clothes. We carried our weapons with us at all times, even when we went for water. A couple things. That right there is nasty. Right? I'm just saying. Like, can you imagine being around a bunch of construction workers that for months didn't change their clothes? And walking up into that and going, whoo, it smells fresh. Right? No, it's be smelling rough. Right? That's nasty. Here's what I want to tell you. Growth sometimes requires inconveniences that you normally would not do. In order for them to rebuild the wall, they had to make some sacrifices and tolerate some things that they wouldn't always have to tolerate, and they probably hadn't tolerated before. I'm suspecting they took baths once a week, most likely. That would be a normal thing. But from the time they started building till the time they were done, they never took off their clothes. There was a sacrifice. It had to be stinky. It wasn't pretty. I'm sure they were soiled. If nobody could wash them, they looked horrible. They looked like they had been wearing them for a long time. Here's the thing with growth. It doesn't matter if it's in the church, in your home, in your spiritual life. Sometimes you're going to go through seasons where you just have to suck it up and say, you know what? I'm going to have to live with this for a little while because this is what's got to be done for me to arrive at the next place. If I want to get from point A to point B, everything is always pretty. Like we want everything, we want to say, yeah, we're going to build the wall. Woohoo. Everything's going to be fine. Life don't, if you still believe life is that way, you're one of those naive people I was talking about earlier. Life doesn't work that way. It's full of heartaches and brokenness and roadblocks and challenges and inconveniences. You're going to have to go through times where you say, you know what, I'm going to have to do this in order to arrive at this. And you just suck it up and you do it. It says we carried our weapons with us at all times, even when we went for water. I've seen this one place in the world ever. And we're getting ready to take a group to Israel here in about a month. I think a month from tomorrow. I went to Israel first time in 2014. In Israel, when you turn 18, you go in the military. Period. It's not a debate. You ain't a question. You just go. Like everybody. You turn 18, military. End of conversation. I think it's 3 years required service, if I remember right. Might be 4, but I think it's 3. But the interesting thing is, when you're in the military, you're always on guard. And so the first time I saw this, so we're in the Middle East, all right, we go in a restaurant, we're sitting there, and this family of 4 come in. There's a young guy, his wife, and 2 little kids, and he's got a machine gun across his shoulder. He's in civilian clothes. He's got a machine gun across his shoulder. I was like, I don't know about y'all, but machine gun and Middle East, like I ain't got, I got questions, all right? I want to know what's happening. And so I asked our guide, and he said he's in the military. I said, how do you know he's in the military? He said, because if you're in the military, you always have to carry your machine gun with you. You have to carry your weapon with you all the time. He said, Israel's an extremely small country. I think it's like 8 miles across. You know, he says it's a very small country. He said, if we're ever attacked, we've got to be ready. Like right then, we can't go home. We can't go to the base. We don't need to go to the car. We got to be ready right then. Here's the thing with growth and progress and moving forward, whether it's in your life or your family, your business and organization, the church, it doesn't matter where it's at. You've always got to be ready. Here's why. The enemy is looking for a weak place, a weak moment, a weak time, a second that you're just not paying attention, that you get distracted, that you get discouraged, and he's looking to attack you. It says they were ready at all times. And that's my challenge for us today as a church, to be ready at all times, no matter what comes our way.